I grew up in New York, where tradition wasn't just respected, it was law. In my conservative Christian household, roles were defined, obedience expected. But I didn't rebel. I focused. While my cousins chased romance and rituals, I chased medicine, memorizing the Krebs cycle, shadowing surgeons, and ignoring distractions. Love was never the goal. Johns Hopkins was. When the acceptance email arrived, I didn't cry, I froze. I'd spent so long chasing that moment, I hadn't imagined what came next. Before we go any further, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far this little story can travel. Let's make this space feel a little more connected, no matter how many miles are between us. Baltimore greeted me with humidity and ambition. Hopkins was everything I dreamed. Ivy-covered buildings, brilliant minds, and a quiet hum of purpose. I wasn't the smartest anymore. That terrified me and excited me at the same time. It also lit a fire. I lived in the anatomy lab, buried myself in rotations, and learned to read between the lines of patient charts, professors' expectations, and my own beliefs. Somewhere in the grind, I began to shift. Not loudly, but deeply. I started questioning faith, identity, and the kind of doctor I wanted to become. Because getting in wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning. Now, after 4 years of relentless work, I've matched into a residency in Los Angeles. And I'm not stopping there. I'm pursuing a specialized oncology fellowship because I don't just want to treat cancer. I want to understand it and to fight it with everything I've got. Residency started with a house key and a knot in my stomach. My dad had bought me a small 2-bedroom place in LA, quiet street, decent bones, a backyard that felt like it had secrets. I didn't know what to do with the space at first. I'd never had a place that was just mine. I planted lavender near the fence, left the second bedroom empty, and let the silence settle in. The hospital was chaos wrapped in fluorescent light. I was thrown into 12-hour shifts, pages that never stopped, and patients whose stories clung to me long after I clocked out. I was smart, sure, but residency isn't about being smart. It's about being fast, being calm, being there. I learned to trust my gut, to ask for help, to say I don't know without shame. I got along with everyone, not because I tried to be liked, but because I showed up ready, curious, and kind. I didn't have time for dating or drama or anything that didn't fit between shifts. But I had purpose. And that was enough. Then one Friday, my attending looked at me and said, "You've earned the weekend off." I blinked. I hadn't had 2 days to myself in months. So when a few coworkers invited me out, I said yes. We ended up at a club downtown, music loud enough to drown out everything we'd seen that week. I danced like someone who'd survived something. Because I had. We laughed, we drank, we let go. For a few hours, we weren't doctors. We were just people. Tired, messy, alive. And standing there, sweat on my skin, bass in my chest, I realized this was part of it too. Not just the medicine. The becoming. That's when I saw her, leaning against the bar, sipping something pink and fizzy, wearing a vintage leather jacket and boots that looked like they'd walked through 5 different lives. She had this energy, like she'd just stepped out of a movie and hadn't realized the cameras stopped rolling. I bumped into her by accident. Literally. I was trying to squeeze past the crowd and my elbow caught her drink. She gasped, looked down at the splash on her sleeve, and then laughed. Well, that's one way to meet someone. "I'm Tiffany," I said, already apologizing, already smiling. "Brittany," she replied, shaking my hand like we were sealing a deal. "Don't worry, this jacket's seen worse." We started talking. She told me she was a personal shopper, mostly for tech guys who didn't know how to dress themselves. Not famous, she said, just rich and hopeless. But her real dream was acting. She'd moved to LA from Flagstaff, Arizona, chasing roles and auditions, and the kind of life that didn't fit inside a cubicle. She showed me her social media, thousands of followers, drawn to her thrifted fashion and the way she narrated her life like it mattered. Her videos were raw, funny, sometimes chaotic. "Sometimes I get political," she said, scrolling past a clip about reproductive rights. "But it's not good content. People want outfits, not opinions." I didn't agree, but I got it. There was something honest in the way she said it, like she'd already wrestled with the trade-offs. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. About the patients I couldn't forget, the auditions she didn't get, the weird ways LA makes you feel both invisible and seen. The club faded around us. The music became background noise. Her stories were messy and beautiful, and they made space for mine in a way I hadn't expected. At one point, I pulled out my phone and found her on Instagram. "You're kind of a star," I said, tapping follow. She laughed and followed me back, scrolling through my feed, mostly hospital snapshots, coffee cups, and the occasional sunset from my backyard. "You're low-key poetic," she said. I shrugged. "It's how I stay sane." Before we left, I reached into my bag and handed her my business card. Just my name, number, and a quiet little logo I'd designed myself. "In case you ever need a personal doctor," I joked. She grinned and tucked it into her jacket pocket like it meant something. By the end of the night, it felt like I'd always known her. Like she was a sister I hadn't met until now. There was no performance, no posturing, just two women trading truths in the middle of a crowded room. We didn't make promises. We didn't need to. We just stood there, laughing about nothing, knowing we'd see each other again. And that was enough. After that night at the club, life snapped back to the rhythm of the hospital, early mornings, late nights, sleeping when I could, eating whatever was closest to edible. I didn't forget Brittany. I just got busy. Residency has a way of swallowing time whole. I barely noticed the months passing until Brittany called. Her voice wasn't crying anymore, but it carried the hollow edge of someone who'd run out of tears. "Can I come hang out at your place?" she asked lightly, but there was weight beneath it. 2 weeks earlier, she'd moved in with her boyfriend. Now she was scared. He didn't know my name, hadn't heard of me. That was enough. I told her about the spare key under the birdhouse. By the time I got home that night with takeout, she was curled on my couch under the glow of the living room lamp. Over cartons of lo mein, she told me everything. Derek had been attentive at first. Then the rules started. Delete social media. Let him manage her accounts. The problem was, those accounts were her job, thousands of followers, brand partnerships, sometimes $5,000 a month. When she refused, he punched the wall and called her a whore. When she left, he chased her into the street, claiming she belonged to him. I listened. My 2-bedroom house suddenly felt like more than shelter. It was a place where she could breathe. But at 4 a.m., pounding on the front door jolted us awake. "I know you're in there, Brittany. Open up." I checked the Ring camera. Derek stood on the porch, shirt half-buttoned, eyes wild. He screamed that he'd planted an AirTag in her purse. Brittany's hands shook as she tore through her bag until she found the tiny white disc hidden in the lining. The door shuddered with his kicks. I called 911 as we ran upstairs. The front door splintered. Drawers slammed. Glass shattered. His boots pounded the stairs until police burst through and dragged him away. He had a gun tucked in his waistband. He wasn't just angry. He'd come to kill. After that night, I reinforced the door, installed cameras, alarms, turned my home into a fortress. Brittany moved into the basement and turned it into her studio. Soon her feed was alive again with thrift flips, hauls, and late-night talks. Derek's case moved fast, breaking and entering unlawful surveillance, unregistered firearm. 6 years in prison. Life steadied. We cooked when we could, traded stories over tea, and fell into small rituals that made my house feel alive. On the anniversary of our meeting, she baked a lemon cake with lavender frosting. We ate, drank, and watched my best friend's wedding. At the end, tipsy and quiet, she leaned in and kissed me. Soft. Certain. Like a question. I froze, stunned, and she slipped away. A month passed without us crossing paths. Then I found her TikTok. I'm bisexual. And I'm in love with a straight girl. She's my best friend. I don't know whether to tell her or stay quiet. She never named me, but I knew. And suddenly I couldn't deny what I'd been circling all along. That kiss hadn't confused me, it had woken me up. I loved her too. The next evening, I went downstairs where she was filming. My pulse thundered. I saw your video, I said. Her eyes widened. Before she could retreat, I stepped closer. I feel the same way. This time when I kissed her, there was no hesitation. For the first time in weeks, the space between us was gone. We didn't need labels, not yet. Just takeout, quiet mornings, and a rhythm that finally felt like a beginning instead of an escape. Over the next year, everything changed, but not all at once. There was no dramatic announcements, no social media post, no sudden shift in how we moved through the world. It was quieter than that. More sacred. We were still roommates, still best friends, still two women trying to make sense of our lives in a city that never slowed down. But now, there was something else. Something unspoken but understood. We learned how to live in the in-between. Some mornings, I'd come down to find Brittany filming in the basement, dressed to the nines, talking to her followers like they were old friends. She'd glance up when I passed, give me a wink, and keep going. Other days, she'd be curled up on the couch in sweats, editing for hours, her laptop balanced on a pillow and her hair in a messy bun. I loved both versions of her. I was deep in my final year of residency, oncology rotations, endless rounds, the kind of emotional weight that doesn't leave when you clock out. Brittany never asked for details, but she always knew when I needed silence, or soup, or a dumb meme to make me laugh. She became my soft place to land. We didn't define it. We didn't rush it. But we grew into it. There were late-night talks on the back steps, where she'd tell me about her dreams, and I'd tell her about my fears. There were fights, too, small ones, about dishes or space or the way I sometimes shut down when I'm overwhelmed. But we always came back to each other. Always. She started baking more. I started sleeping better. We built routines without realizing it: Friday takeout, Sunday laundry, Tuesday night wine and movies. We watched my best friend's wedding again, this time knowing exactly what it was. We laughed at how wrong we'd been the first time. She never pushed me to label anything. She just let me be. And in that space, I started to understand myself more clearly than I ever had. By spring, I was preparing for fellowship applications. She was landing brand deals and growing her platform. We celebrated each other's wins like they were shared victories. Because they were. One night, after a long shift, I came home to find her asleep on the couch, a half-eaten cupcake on the coffee table, and a movie paused mid-scene. I sat beside her, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "I love you." She didn't stir. But I knew she'd heard me. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a chapter. This was the beginning of a life we were building together. One kiss, one shift, one quiet morning at a time. I'd just accepted a fellowship at a different hospital in LA. It came with a small raise, but also a longer commute, more time in traffic, less time at home. Still, it felt like progress. Like I was stepping into the next chapter of my life. We were celebrating at a cozy little Indian restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat. Brittany had picked it. She loved the mango lassi and the way the walls were painted in deep reds and golds. We were sitting across from each other, laughing over samosas, fingers loosely intertwined on the table, when I heard a voice behind me. "I thought that was you." I turned. It was my aunt. Her eyes flicked down to our hands, and instinctively, I pulled mine back. Too fast. Too obvious. She looked at Brittany, then at me. "And who is this?" I opened my mouth, ready to say my roommate, but Brittany beat me to it. She extended her hand, calm and clear. "I'm Brittany, Tiffany's girlfriend." My aunt froze. You could see it in her face, the shock, the calculation, the discomfort. She muttered, "Oh, I see. Sorry, I forgot, I need to go," and practically fled the restaurant. Brittany watched her leave, then turned to me. "That was weird, right?" She saw the color drain from my face before I could answer. "Are you okay?" All I could say was, "This is going to be so bad." She paid the bill without another word, kissed my cheek gently, and we headed home. That night, I told her everything. About my family. About how conservative they were. About how I'd avoided the subject for months, because I knew exactly how it would go. I told her they were deeply anti-gay, and that my father, especially, would never accept us. It was our biggest fight. I wanted to say my aunt was just confused. I wanted to say we're just friends when my dad inevitably called. I wanted to protect her, but I also wanted to protect myself. Brittany didn't agree. She said hiding wasn't protection, it was erasure. We went to bed still angry. Still hurt. And then my dad didn't just call. He showed up. He stood in the doorway like he owned the place, which, technically, he did. His voice was cold, his words sharper than I'd ever heard them. "If you don't end this unholy relationship," he said, "and she moves out today." Brittany laughed, incredulously. "You can't tell her what to do in her own house." That's when he smiled, cruel, smug. "This isn't her house. It's mine. You have 1 week. If she's still here, and you're still dating, I'm selling it. You'll be cut off. No more credit card. No more family money. No inheritance." He looked at us like we were filth. "Disgusting," he said, and walked out. Brittany turned to me stunned. "What was that about?" I told her. About the credit card. About how my dad paid for everything. About how he owned the house. About how I'd never told her because I didn't want her to see how tangled I still was in their control. She asked, "Do I need to move out?" I looked at her. The woman who'd stood up for me, who'd made this house feel like home, who'd kissed me like it meant something. "No," I said. "I don't want to lose you. But we'll need to rent a place." She nodded. Quiet. Steady. We called it our love nest. It was a rundown high-rise on the 20th floor, the kind of building where the elevator rattled and the hallway carpet had seen better decades. The rent was far too high for what it was, but the view, stretching out over the city, glittering at night, made us feel like we were living above the noise. The first year there was good. Not perfect, but good. We made it ours, plants on the balcony, thrifted dishes, a couch that was too big for the living room but perfect for curling up together. We'd eat takeout cross-legged on the floor, watch movies until we fell asleep, and joke about how one day we'd tell people we started our life together in a shoebox in the sky. But without my dad's credit card and now paying rent, my money was tight. I kept telling Brittany that once I finished my training, things would get better. That I'd make more. That we just had to hold on. Somewhere along the way, the jokes started. Little digs from her about how I was poor, about how maybe I wasn't a very good doctor if I didn't make much money. At first, I brushed them off. Then I started throwing my own barbs back, about her being an entitled influencer, about how maybe she wasn't getting acting jobs because she wasn't a good actor. The fights became a rhythm. Some days, I'd just sleep at the hospital to avoid starting another one. When I suggested couples counseling, she exploded. Said she wasn't going to some head shrink to be looked down on, that we didn't have any mental illness, that she loved her mom and didn't need someone to fix her. I tried to explain that counseling wasn't about that, it was about us, but she wouldn't hear it. By our 3rd year, I was finishing my fellowship, applying for my full medical license so I could finally practice without supervision. That's when she announced she wanted a baby. Not someday, now. And she wanted me to carry it. She didn't want to get all fat, but she did want to be a mommy blogger. I told her it wasn't the right time. She didn't like that answer. Around then, I started calling my mom again. Slowly, we began to reconnect. I didn't tell Brittany. A few weeks later, I surprised her with a trip to the Halekulani Hotel in Honolulu. What I didn't mention was that my grandmother owned it, so all we had to pay for were the flights. Brittany had the time of her life, posting videos, lounging by the pool, never once asking how I could afford it. For a moment, I thought maybe we were finding our way back to each other. But on the flight home, she upgraded her ticket without telling me, leaving me alone in coach. When we landed, I couldn't find her in the terminal. When I got back to the apartment, her luggage was there. But she was gone. She didn't come home for 2 days. Reconnecting with my mom started small. A phone call here, a text there. At first, it was awkward. Years of silence don't just dissolve overnight, but she didn't push. She asked about my work, about my health, about whether I was eating enough. She never talked about my dad, and I never brought him up. Dad still wouldn't speak to me. But he'd made it clear to the rest of the family that if they wanted to, they could. No one came to the apartment. No one met Brittany. But a few cousins started calling, checking in, asking how I was doing. I didn't sugarcoat things. I told them about the fights, about the tension, about how hard it was to keep my head above water. They didn't judge. They just listened. One night, my mom said gently, "You should think about therapy. Not because something's wrong with you, because you've been carrying too much for too long." So I went. I didn't tell Brittany. It felt like one more thing she'd turn into a fight, one more way she'd say I was making her look bad. But in those sessions, I started to hear myself more clearly. My therapist told me, "You can't build intimacy on secrets, even small ones. If you want this relationship to work, you have to let her see you." I knew she was right. So I decided to try. I planned a date night, something simple but intentional. Dinner somewhere nice, maybe a walk after. It felt like forever since we'd gone out together without it turning into an argument. I wanted to remind us both of what it felt like before the cracks started showing. But every time I brought it up, Brittany was too busy. Filming, editing, meeting with brands, going out with friends. There was always something. I told myself it was bad timing, that we'd find a night soon. But deep down, I could feel it. The space between us wasn't just about schedules anymore. It was about something bigger. Something neither of us wanted to name. The call came late at night. My mom's voice was broken, trembling in a way I'd never heard before. "She's gone," she said. "Mom's gone." My grandmother. A heart attack in her sleep. No warning. No chance to say goodbye. I sat there in silence, the weight of it pressing down on me. My mom was crying, asking if I would come home for the funeral. Of course I would. There was no question. But when I hung up, the apartment was quiet. Brittany was in the living room, editing a video, headphones on, the glow of her ring light spilling across the floor. We'd been living like that for months now, parallel lives under the same roof, orbiting each other without ever colliding. I stood in the doorway, wondering if I should tell her, wondering if she'd even care. Instead, I said, "I've got a work thing. They need me in New York for a week." She didn't look up from her screen. Just said, "Okay," like it was nothing. No questions. No hesitation. "No why? Or are you okay?" "Just okay." When I flew home for the funeral, the family was already divided. Some cousins hugged me, whispered that they were glad I came. Others wouldn't even look at me. I heard the words whispered behind my back, disgusting, sick, unholy, needs help. My dad never spoke to me. Not once. He stood at the front of the church, stiff and cold, as though I wasn't even there. But my mom held my hand. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. After the service, the will was read. My grandmother, who had always been quiet but kind, had left me something I never expected. $5 million. And her resort, the Halekulani Hotel in Honolulu. The room went silent. I could feel the stares, the shock. My father's jaw tightened, his face red with fury. To him, it was unthinkable that I, the daughter who had shamed the family, would be mentioned at all. In his mind, I should have been cut off completely, erased from the will. And yet, there it was. My grandmother had left me a piece of her legacy. Not the crown of the family's empire, but still, something undeniable. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt overwhelmed. Grief and disbelief tangled together, heavy in my chest. That night, I sat alone in a hotel room, the kind with crisp white sheets and a view of the city lights that felt too bright for the heaviness in my chest. My grandmother was gone. My family was fractured, maybe beyond repair. And yet, she had left me the Halekulani Hotel, her resort, her legacy. I lay back against the pillows, scrolling through my phone. Old posts Brittany had made from our stay there filled the screen, her laughing by the pool, posing with cocktails, twirling in sundresses against the ocean backdrop. For a moment, I let myself sink into the memory of that trip, when things between us still felt light, when I thought we were finding our way back to each other. Then I saw her latest post. It wasn't a memory, it was a teaser. A glossy video, her face perfectly lit, her voice brimming with excitement. She was hyping up some big reveal, promising her followers it would be life-changing. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. The next morning, I sat in a polished downtown office, the kind with glass walls and leather chairs that smelled faintly of polish and old paper. The lawyer slid the documents across the table, his tone calm, professional, but I could feel the gravity in every word. My father had no grounds to contest the will. My grandmother had been in sound mind. She chaired a board meeting the very day she died, sharp as ever, her notes meticulous. And she had been deliberate. She'd written a clause into the will that shut down any attempt to challenge it. The Halekulani Hotel was mine. The inheritance, $6 million, was mine. I signed where he told me to sign, my hand steady even though my chest felt tight. It was surreal, sitting there in grief and paperwork, knowing my grandmother had trusted me with something so immense. When I left the office, the city felt different. The air sharper, the noise louder. I walked back to the hotel where I was staying, clutching the folder of documents like it might burn through my hands. The hotel room was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioner. Papers from the lawyer were spread across the desk, the ink still fresh with signatures that made everything real. The inheritance. The hotel. My grandmother's final gift. For the first time in months, I felt a strange clarity. I couldn't keep living in half-truths, hiding pieces of myself from Brittany. If there was any chance of saving us, I had to lay it all out. In my head, I began to shape the conversation. I'd tell her about the distance I'd been feeling, how much I missed us, the way we used to laugh over takeout, the way we felt like a team. I'd admit the things I'd been keeping from her, the therapy sessions, the quiet phone calls with my mom and cousins, the way I'd been trying to rebuild some part of my family even while shutting her out. I'd tell her I didn't want secrets anymore, that I wanted to know if she missed us too, if she believed we could find our way back. And then, when the air was clear, I'd tell her about the inheritance. About the hotel. About the possibility of taking some time off, of focusing on us instead of just surviving shift to shift. The thought filled me with a nervous kind of hope. Maybe this could be the turning point. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Brittany's face lit up the screen, her latest post. Another teaser, hyping up some life-changing reveal. I watched it twice, curious despite myself. What was she planning? A new project? A pet? Was she changing her hair color again? For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of excitement instead of dread. Maybe we both had surprises to share. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. I had planned to spend one more day with my family, but something in me wanted to get home early. Maybe it was the folder of paperwork in my bag, maybe it was the speech I'd been rehearsing in my head. Either way, I changed my ticket, upgraded to first class, and spent the flight back to LA writing out every word I wanted to say to her. This time, I had a plan. But when I walked through the door, the plan dissolved. She was standing there with her arms around a man I'd never seen before, kissing him like I didn't exist. Behind them, her suitcases were stacked by the door, already packed. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice breaking before I could study it. She turned, looked at me without flinching. "I was hoping to avoid this," she said flatly. "But I'm sick of your broke ways. I thought you'd be this rich doctor, not a loser. I'm leaving." I opened my mouth to speak, but she cut me off. "This is my husband, Richard. We got married yesterday." The words hit like a blow. I tried again, desperate to make sense of it, but she raised her hand. "Look, this is done. Just deal with it." She turned away, and that's when I saw the letter taped to the fridge. I pulled it down with shaking hands. It was cold, blunt. She wrote that she'd stopped loving me a long time ago. That she deserved better. That Richard could give her the life she wanted, money, stability, status. She said I was just a broke loser. I stood there in the silence of the apartment we'd once called our love nest, the letter trembling in my hands, the man she'd chosen waiting by the door. Everything I had planned to say, everything I had hoped for was gone. At first, I moved through the days in a kind of trance. I had received my medical license. After years of training, sacrifice, and sleepless nights, I was finally cleared to practice independently in the oncology department. It should have been a triumph. But instead of stepping into the role I'd worked so hard for, I backed out. I told them it was family problems, that I needed time. The truth was I couldn't breathe. I sat at home, surrounded by silence, and cried. Not just for Brittany or my grandmother or the betrayal, but for the version of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. Then one day I opened TikTok. I didn't plan it. I just hit record. I started talking. A story time, I called it. I told the truth, raw, unfiltered. About how I had loved her. How I had chosen her over my father's approval. How she got married while I was burying my grandmother. I read the letter she left behind. I talked about our trip to the Halekulani Hotel, how magical it had felt, how I'd been hiding my therapy, my grief, my hope. And then I told them what my grandmother had left me, $6 million. And the hotel itself. I tagged Brittany in every video. I didn't expect anything from her. I wasn't trying to shame or provoke. I just needed to speak. To be heard. And strangely, it helped. The comments poured in, some kind, some cruel, but all real. People saw me. Not as a doctor, not as a girlfriend, not as a daughter, but as a person trying to make sense of heartbreak and healing. That's when I decided to go to the resort. Not as a guest. Not as someone escaping, but as the owner. I wanted to walk the halls my grandmother once walked. I wanted to feel the ocean air and remember what it felt like to dream. I wanted to start over, not with Brittany, not with my family, but with myself. The car pulled up to the entrance of the Halekulani Hotel just as the sun was sinking into the Pacific, the sky streaked with coral and violet. The ocean shimmered beyond the lobby, calm and endless. I stepped out slowly, heels clicking against the stone. The Bell staff greeted me with warm smiles, but there was a flicker of recognition in their eyes. Word had spread. The new owner had arrived. Inside, the air smelled of orchids and sea breeze. Everything gleamed, polished marble floors, soft lantern light, the quiet hum of a place that had been cared for with devotion. I'd been here before, but never like this. Never as Dr. Tiffany Ellison, owner. The front desk manager approached with a practiced smile. "Welcome home, Dr. Ellison." I nodded, my throat tight. "It's good to be back." They led me to the executive wing, past the spa and the garden terrace, up to the top floor. My suite overlooked the ocean, but what caught my eye was the office next door, glass walls, teak furniture, and a nameplate already mounted on the door. Dr. Tiffany Ellison, owner and director. I stepped inside. The desk was sleek, the chair comfortable, the view breathtaking. On the desk sat another nameplate, identical to the one on the door. I ran my fingers across the engraving, letting it ground me. That night, I began posting. A video of the staff welcoming me. A slow pan across the lobby, the gardens, the infinity pool. A clip of me unlocking the office door, the nameplate in full view. I spoke softly in the captions, starting over. "This place means more than I can explain. Thank you for being here with me." The comments poured in support, curiosity, encouragement. People saw me not just as someone who had been left behind, but as someone stepping into something new. I posted a video of the kitchen staff laughing as they prepared a tasting menu for me. Another of the spa directors showed me the wellness suite. I introduced the head of guest services, who had worked under my grandmother for 20 years. Each post was a thread in the tapestry I was weaving, one of healing, ownership, and quiet transformation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. And I was exactly where I was meant to be. The first message came late at night. At first, it was anger. Brittany accused me of lying to her, of hiding things, of betraying her trust. "How could you keep something like that from me?" she wrote. She said she was hurt, that I had made her look like a fool. Then came the demands. She wanted a payout. She said she deserved something for all the years she'd invested. At one point, she even asked for free passes to the resort, framing it like a joke, but I could hear the edge in her words. And then, unbelievably, she had the gall to say it could be my wedding gift to her. I stared at the screen, numb. But the tone shifted. The anger gave way to apologies. She said she was sorry. That she missed me. That she wanted to fix us. She wrote that she had never really loved Richard, that it had always been about the money, that she had made a mistake. "Can you find it in your heart to forgive me?" I read the words over and over. And then I put the phone down. I never responded. Because some silences are louder than any answer. One afternoon, my phone lit up with a missed call. Then the voicemail icon blinked. It was Brittany. Her voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable. She spoke for minutes, pouring it all out. She said she had been scared of being poor her whole life, that fear had driven her into Richard's arms. She admitted she never loved him, only his wallet. She said she missed me, that she missed us, that she had made a mistake. I sat there listening, the words washing over me like echoes from another life. But instead of anger, I felt something else: clarity. I opened my laptop, searched for Richard's Facebook, and found him easily. His profile was polished, professional, the kind of man who thought his life was secure. I forwarded him the voicemail. Not out of revenge. Not to twist the knife. But because he deserved to know the truth. He deserved the chance to see her clearly, the way I finally did. When I hit send, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, Brittany's choices weren't my burden to carry. I wasn't her safety net, her secret, or her stepping stone. I was free. And that was the real happy ending. Before I wrap this up, I just want to say this. If you've ever gone through something like this, or if you're going through it right now, please stay strong. Share your story. You never know who might hear it and realize they're not alone. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and share. And if you want to follow along as I keep moving forward, hit that subscribe button. We're all figuring this out together.